The generator hums somewhere beneath the floor. You feel it more than hear it. A low, steady vibration that travels up through the soles of your boots and settles somewhere in your chest, like a second heartbeat. The ranger station smells of damp wood and machine oil and something older underneath, something green and living that the walls cannot entirely keep out. Through the small window above the desk, the jungle is a wall of black. The clock on the wall reads 11:47. The second hand moves. Everything else is still. Outside, the island breathes. That is the only word for it. It breathes in long, slow cycles that you have come to know over many nights in this outpost. The evening settling into itself, the canopy adjusting its weight, the air pressing down warm and close before lifting again on some invisible tide. You've been here long enough that the breathing no longer feels strange. It feels, if you are honest, like something you've been listening for your whole life. The radio crackles once and goes quiet. The log on the desk has 3 entries for the night. Nothing unusual. Perimeter check completed at 1900. Sector 4 gate confirmed secure at 21:30. Temperature holding at 22 degrees in the northern valley. You write the time in the margin. 11:48. Beyond the window, somewhere past the fence line and the sensor array and the long corridor of trees that the island keeps planting faster than anyone can map, something moves. You do not see it. You feel the movement the way you feel the generator, through the floor, through the night itself, through some frequency that your instruments do not measure. You set down your pen, you lean back in the chair, and without meaning to, you begin to listen. Welcome. Settle in, wherever you are. Pull the blanket a little closer if the night is cool, or let the warmth of the room hold you if it is warm. You are here now, and the world outside can wait. For the next few hours, you are going to be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere green and ancient. Somewhere the air is thick with moisture and the calls of things that should not exist. Somewhere the night shift rangers of a certain island have walked their quiet rounds for years, keeping their notes, watching the fences, and trying to put into words what they saw when the rest of the world was sleeping. This is not a story of fear. That is the first thing to understand. There is wonder here, and there is strangeness, and there is the particular calm that only comes when you are very small in the presence of something very old. But there is no fear. Fear is for daylight, for alertness, for the world of decisions and consequences. What you're about to enter is something softer than that. The slow unfolding of a night on the island, told through the eyes of the people who stayed behind when the tour groups left, and the jeeps returned to the main compound, and the gates swung shut for another evening. The rangers had their own name for those hours. They called it the Long Watch. Not because anything dramatic happened during those hours, though sometimes it did, quietly, in the way that vast things move when they think no one is paying attention. They called it the Long Watch because of what the darkness required of you. Not vigilance, not courage, something more like patience, the willingness to sit with what you could not fully see and let it be what it was. You are a ranger tonight, or something like one. You have come to the station at the edge of the northern sector where the fence curves east toward the floodplain and the sensor towers blink their slow red signals into the canopy above. Your shift begins at midnight. Your log is open, your pen is in your hand, and the island, immense, breathing, alive with things that evolution abandoned and science recovered. The island is all around you. Let your breathing slow. There is nothing you need to do right now except be here. The generator hums, the trees press close, and somewhere in the warm black distance the ancient world is going about its ancient business as it has every night since the first specimen walked out of its hatching room and tilted its head toward the sky. If you enjoy listening to sleepy prehistoric dinosaur stories like this, subscribe. I post stories like this weekly. The night is long. It is also, in its way, very beautiful. And it begins the way all the best nights do. Quietly, with a sound you almost miss, and the slow understanding that something extraordinary is near. The ranger station has been here for 11 years. You can tell by the way the wood has settled, the slight lean of the south wall, the door that needs lifting before it will close properly, the way the fluorescent light above the desk flickers once every 40 minutes without fail, as though it is marking time in its own private calendar. The repairs were scheduled and then deferred and then scheduled again. That is how things work on the island. There is always something more urgent than the door that sticks. The station sits on a raised platform of poured concrete, 3 steps up from the ground, which is wise given the wet season. In the rainy months, water moves through this part of the island in sheets and then in streams, and then in broad, slow-moving pools that take 3 days to drain. The rangers who first designed this outpost were thinking about the future, which is a habit the island tends to either cultivate or extinguish, depending on the person. Inside, the main room is small and efficiently arranged. The desk runs along the north wall beneath the window. Above it, a corkboard holds the week's duty roster, a laminated map of sector assignments, and 3 photographs pinned without ceremony. One of a hadrosaur herd crossing the eastern floodplain at dawn, one of a juvenile sauropod peering through the fence at Station 7, and one that is just a sunset, unremarkable, except that whoever took it kept it here for reasons of their own. The radio lives on a shelf to the left of the desk. It is an older model, replaced twice, and somehow still the same radio. The same scuffs on the casing, the same tendency to pick up a faint interference pattern between frequencies that the technicians have never been able to explain and eventually stopped trying to. On quiet nights, when the island is settled and the check-ins are complete, the rangers sometimes leave the dial between stations just to hear it. That soft rhythmic interference that sounds, if you're tired enough, almost like breathing. There is a narrow bed along the opposite wall, a sleeping bag folded at its foot, a small shelf with a thermos, a paperback with a broken spine, a jar of hard candies that has been here longer than the current duty cycle. No one admits to replenishing it. No one admits to eating from it either, though the level drops steadily, month by month, like a slow tide. You pour a cup of coffee from the thermos, and it is still warm, which is one of the small victories of a night shift. The mug is ceramic and heavy, the kind of mug that has a satisfying weight in the hand, and you hold it with both palms and let the warmth move through your fingers. Outside, the generator hums its 2-note chord. The trees make the sound that large trees always make at night. A sound like breathing, like patience, like something that has been standing in one place for a very long time and has made its peace with that. The shift log from the previous ranger is on the desk beside yours. You read it without urgency. The handwriting is neat, the notes brief and professional. Eastern perimeter clear at 1800. No fence anomalies detected. Thermal imaging confirmed 4 individuals in Sector 9. 2 adults, 2 subadults, all resting along the northern bank. The last entry is at 23:45, 15 minutes before your arrival. All quiet, weather stable, estimated visibility in the valley approximately 400 meters. All quiet. You write the same words in your own log because they are accurate and because, on the island at midnight, they carry a particular quality of reassurance that no other combination of words quite matches. All quiet does not mean nothing is happening. Things are always happening on the island. What it means is that what is happening is appropriate to the hour and the place, that the vast ungoverned machinery of life here is running as it should, without intervention, without alarm, without any need of you beyond your presence and your attention. You pull your chair closer to the window and look out. The fence is visible in the sensor lights, chain link and reinforced steel cable, running in both directions until it curves out of sight. Beyond it, the tree line begins. In daylight, you can see perhaps 30 meters into the understory before the canopy closes and the light fails. At night, you can see the first few trees, their trunks pale and solid in the sensor glow, and then nothing but layered darkness. Nothing moves. Nothing that you can see, anyway. But the island is full of movement that does not require your seeing it. The small mammals in the undergrowth, the insects in their perpetual industry, the nocturnal creatures that the island has reintroduced alongside the ones everyone knows about, the ones that make the sensor arrays necessary, and the ones everyone knows about as well, of course, the large ones, the ancient ones, the ones sleeping now in their sectors, or moving through the dark with the quiet authority of animals that have never, in 66 million years of evolutionary memory, learned to be afraid of the night. You rest your chin in your hand, you watch the fence, you listen to the generator and the trees and the faint electrical music between the radio frequencies. Your coffee cools slowly in the mug. Your eyelids feel the familiar pull of the late hour. It is, as the log says, all quiet. And in the quiet, the island is every bit as magnificent as it is in the noise of the day. Perhaps more so. because in the quiet you can feel what you cannot always feel in daylight, the immense, indifferent, extraordinary fact of what is out there beyond your fence line, living its life without reference to yours. You write the time, midnight even, the start of something. The night is only beginning, you settle back in your chair and you let it come. At 12:30 you take your first perimeter walk. This is the protocol. It is also, in the way of most island protocols, both a practical requirement and a quiet gift. 40 minutes outside in the dark, moving slowly along the fence line with a torch and a tablet, checking the sensor nodes and the gate locks in the electrified sections, and breathing air that no building can replicate. You pull on your jacket before going out. Not because it is cold. The night air here settles around you like warm water, dense with moisture and the exhaled green breath of 10,000 species of plant, but because the jacket has deep pockets, and the pockets are useful, and also because there is something about the jacket that marks the transition. Inside you are a person at a desk. Outside, in the jacket, in the dark, with the torch making its small pale circle on the ground ahead of you, you are something else, a witness, a small, walking attention in a very large world. The 3 steps down from the station are wet with the evening's humidity, even though it has not rained. Everything on the island is always slightly damp. The soil under your boots is dark and yielding, not unpleasant, and it makes a soft sound with each step, a quiet compression, a small giving way. You have come to find this sound meditative. It marks the rhythm of the walk. Compression and release, compression and release. The sensor lights along the fence create pools of amber visibility every 15 meters or so. Between them, there are gaps of genuine dark, not the softened dark of a city with its ambient glow, but the thick, close dark of a place where electricity is deliberate and rare and the sky above is crowded with stars that no light pollution dilutes. You step from one amber pool to the next, and in the intervals between, the darkness is a presence rather than an absence. The sounds of the island at night are different from the sounds of the island by day. The daytime island is loud in the way of all living systems, bird song and insect chorus and the distant calls of the large animals, and the mechanical sounds of the facility overlaid on all of it. The nighttime island is not silent, but its sounds have changed register. Lower, slower. The insects are still there, but their pitch has shifted. The frogs in the drainage channels have begun their evening discourse, and beneath all of it, beneath everything, there is that steady low frequency that you feel as much as here, the island's own pulse, or something you interpret as a pulse because the human nervous system needs patterns and the island obliges. You reach the first sensor node, a grey box on a steel post, its green indicator light blinking in its slow, reliable rhythm. You tap the tablet and the reading comes back clean. Fence integrity 100% in this sector. No movement within 20 meters of the boundary in the past 60 minutes. You make the note and move on. The path curves east here, following the fence as it runs toward the corner post that marks the boundary of your sector. To your left, the fence, and then the dark beyond it. To your right, the cleared strip of ground that borders the fence on the interior side, kept clear for visibility, for maintenance access, for the simple operational logic that you need to see what is coming. Beyond the cleared strip, the interior vegetation begins, and the interior vegetation of this island is not the manicured softness of a park. It is dense and old and grows with a determination that the maintenance crews fight and the island wins. You pass a muddy patch where earlier rain has pooled and not yet drained. Your torch catches it, and for a moment the pooled water reflects the sky, a small dark mirror in the ground holding a fragment of stars. You look at it for a moment longer than you need to. The stars in the water are as real as the stars above, just arranged differently. Then you see it. Not close, not alarming. But there, in the sensor light's outer reach, where the amber begins to thin into the dark beyond the fence, a shape. A movement, really, more than a shape. Something large shifting its weight. You know this feeling. You have felt it on many walks, on many nights. The moment when the darkness beyond the fence organizes itself into something specific. You stop walking. You do not reach for anything. You simply stand and look, torch pointing down at your feet so you're not silhouetting yourself or sending any signal of alarm. You breathe slowly, in, out. The moisture in the air sits on your lips like a memory of rain. The movement comes again, and now the shape is clearer, a long neck, dark against dark, moving in the unhurried way of an animal that is browsing in the night. A sauropod. One of the younger ones from Sector 8, if the profile is right, a creature perhaps 8 meters long, still learning the boundaries of its world with the calm curiosity of the very large. It is standing at the fence line, not pressing against it, not testing it, just standing there the way large herbivores stand when they are not eating and not moving and not afraid, simply being in the particular complete way that only animals seem to manage. You watch it for several minutes. It does not look at you, or if it does, you cannot tell. The eye that occasionally swings in your direction is large and dark and catches no reflection from your torch, which is pointed at the ground. The animal breathes. Its ribs expand and contract with a rhythm slower than yours, deeper than yours, anchored to some larger clock. Eventually, without urgency, it turns away. The long neck swings back toward the tree line. The body follows, that slow, deliberate reorientation of an enormous mass, the ground tremor of each footfall barely detectable, but there, if you're paying attention. The darkness takes it back. The amber light holds an empty fence line once more. You exhale. You write the sighting in your tablet. Juvenile sauropod, probable Sector 8 individual, fence proximity at node 3, no fence contact, no unusual behavior, departed toward tree line. The words are accurate. They capture nothing of the experience of standing in the dark beside a fence, while something 66 million years gone looks at you through the night. You continue your walk. The fence stretches ahead in its amber intervals. The stars lean down close. And somewhere behind you, the darkness carries a long neck and slow breathing, and the weight of the oldest kind of patience. If you're drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. When you return to the station after the first walk, you are warm from the exertion and the night air and the particular kind of alertness that comes from moving through the dark with your senses open. You pour what remains of the coffee, which is cold now, and drink it anyway, and sit down at the desk with a feeling that is not quite tiredness and not quite wakefulness, but something in between. A state that long-shift workers learn to live in, a plateau of sustainable attention that requires neither effort nor rest. The logbooks are on the shelf above the bed. 11 years of them, thick binders with year labels on their spines. You have read them before in fragments, on other nights when the hours needed filling. Tonight you take down the oldest one, the first year's log, its binder faded and the plastic cover soft with age, and you open it somewhere in the middle. The handwriting changes every few pages. The early rangers wrote in different hands, different styles, different degrees of terseness or expansion. Some of them wrote with the clipped efficiency of people trained in military or scientific notation. Times, coordinates, observations, nothing more. Others wrote as though they were composing letters to someone who would need to understand not just what happened, but what it felt like. You find an entry from the 4th month of operations. The ranger is unnamed in the log. They used initials only, a privacy convention that was later abandoned, and the date is a Tuesday in early spring before the wet season had fully arrived. The entry begins in the usual way. Perimeter checks completed, all sectors confirmed, weather clear. Then it shifts. The notation reads, at approximately 0200, observed adult female theropod at the Sector 4 ridgeline. Animal was stationary. Duration of observation approximately 12 minutes. Behavior, none that I can classify. The animal was standing at the edge of the ridge and looking south. I have seen this individual at the ridge before, always at night, always facing south. I do not know what she's looking toward. The valley is in that direction, and beyond it, the coast. There is nothing there that our instruments register as significant. That is where the professional notation ends. Then, below, in smaller, slightly different ink that suggests the pen was set down and picked up again. I counted her ribs from this distance. I could see them. There is something about that. The visibility of the machinery of a living thing, the ribs that hold the breath, the spine that carries the weight. I do not have language for what I was feeling watching her. I wrote it down anyway. You read the entry twice. You look out the window at the dark. The fence is there, blinking amber. The trees are there, holding their dark positions. You think about the ranger who wrote those words in the early morning of a spring Tuesday 11 years ago, trying to find language for something that resisted it. There are more entries like that one. Not many. The majority of the logbooks are professional and brief, but enough that you learn to look for them, to turn pages with a certain anticipation. An entry from a summer night in the 3rd year, written by someone whose initials suggest a surname beginning with K, describing a herd of smaller ornithopods gathered at the water channel on the eastern boundary, pressed together in sleep, their sides rising and falling in a synchronized rhythm so close that the whole group appeared to breathe as a single organism. The ranger sat and watched for an hour. The entry says, "I did not want to move. I was afraid that if I moved, the spell would break, and I would remember that I was a person on a night shift and not a person watching something ancient sleep." An entry from a November night, wind strong from the north, the temperature dropping enough that the ranger had noted the barometric reading. A stegosaur had been found standing in the rain, apparently by choice, the thermal imaging showing its plates raised to catch the warmth that lightning briefly offered. The ranger had watched through the scope for 20 minutes. Entry reads, "She stood there in it. Just stood there. I do not think she was sheltering. I think she was doing what she wanted to do." You set the logbook down and look at the corkboard above the desk. The photograph of the hadrosaur herd at dawn is the largest one, pinned at eye level. You have looked at it many times without really looking at it. You look at it now. The herd is moving, caught mid-stride, dozens of them in that particular wave-like way that large herbivore groups move, no individual quite in step with the ones beside it. The whole group a kind of continuous motion like water finding its level. Someone took this photograph and decided to keep it here, on this corkboard, in this station, where every ranger on the night shift would see it. That was a decision made with care, you think. Or not a decision at all. Just someone putting up a photograph because it meant something to them, a meaning being one of the things that persists in a place even after the people who created it have moved on. The logbooks represent 11 years of people sitting in this room, looking out this window, walking this fence, and trying to set down what they witnessed. The professional observations are important. The timestamps and the GPS coordinates and the behavioral notations are the data the facility uses to track population health and habitat use and a dozen other metrics that matter enormously. But the other entries, the smaller, quieter ones, the ones written in different ink and softer handwriting, those are something else. Those are proof that the people who watched this island night after night were changed by it, that something about the watching left a mark. You pick up your own pen, your log is open in front of you, you have written midnight. Shift commenced, weather stable, perimeter check initiated 12:30. You have written the sauropod sighting in brief correct terminology. You think about the ranger who wrote about the ribs, about the one who watched the ornithopods sleep. You add one more line to your own entry below the official notation in smaller letters. You write, "Something is moving in the valley to the south. I can hear it. I do not know what it is yet." You cap your pen. The generator hums, the radio murmurs its soft interference, and the night, patient and enormous, leans in close to the window to listen. The sound is low. That is the first thing to understand about it. Low in the way that large instruments are low. Not a sound you hear with your ears first, but a sound you feel in your sternum, in the soft space beneath your collarbone, in the same register as the generator's hum but slower, more variable, shaped by something that breathes. You had noticed it before in the earlier months of your assignment to the northern sector. The other rangers mentioned it in handover briefings, casually, the way experienced people mention things they have normalized. The valley calls. That was all they said. The valley calls usually between 1 and 3 in the morning, usually on nights when the humidity is high and the wind is moving from the south. They did not explain what it was because explaining it, you would come to understand, was not really the point. You step outside again now, not for a formal walk but just to stand on the top step and listen. The air has thickened since your last time out. The moisture is heavier, the kind of dense night air that softens sound at a distance, while paradoxically carrying certain frequencies further than they should travel. The trees are darker shapes against a dark sky. The sensor lights along the fence blink their amber rhythm. And there it is. It comes from the south, from the direction of the wide flat valley that opens between the two ridgelines 3 kilometers from your station. It is a hadrosaur call. You know that now. Know it the way you know the generator's note and the frog song in the drainage channels and all the other sounds this island has taught you without a lesson plan. But knowing its source does not make it less remarkable. If anything, knowing makes it more so. The hadrosaurs call to each other at night for reasons that the behavioural data suggest have to do with group cohesion, keeping the herd together in the dark, maintaining contact over distances that daylight vision cannot bridge. The calls travel in the sub-bass frequencies that move through ground and air alike, felt as much as heard, designed by millions of years of evolution to carry through forest and across open water and up hillsides to where the rest of the herd is waiting. What the behavioural data does not fully capture is what it feels like to stand on a station step at 1 in the morning and have it move through you. There are multiple individuals calling now. You can distinguish them if you are patient. Each one is slightly different in pitch and rhythm, the way voices in a choir are distinct from one another even within the same harmonic range. One of them has a longer call, a sustained note that rises slightly at its end like a question. Another answers immediately with something shorter, more repetitive. A third joins from farther away, its call attenuated by distance into something more felt than heard, a vibration in the air around your face. The herd in the valley numbers approximately 60 individuals, according to the population census from last quarter. They have been using the valley floor as a nighttime rest area for at least 3 years, moving up to the ridgeline forest during the day to browse, and then descending in the late afternoon as the light changes. The rangers who first documented this pattern called it the evening migration, though it is really more of a daily rhythm than a migration, a routine as domestic and regular as any commute. At night, settled in the valley, they talk. The science team believes the calling serves multiple functions: reunion vocalizations when separated individuals find their way back to the group, alerting calls when something in the dark requires attention, and a third category that the researchers label, with careful academic neutrality, maintenance calls, which is their terminology for vocalizations that appear to serve no immediately obvious purpose other than the continued assertion of presence. I am here, I am still here, we are here. You lean your shoulder against the station doorframe and listen to the maintenance calls moving up through the valley and across the cleared ground and through the fence and all the way to where you're standing. The frogs in the drainage channel have paused. Even they seem to be listening, or perhaps they simply share a frequency range with the calls and cannot speak over them. There is a particular quality to the sound at this moment. Several individuals overlapping, their calls weaving in and out of phase with each other, creating a texture of sound that is dense without being loud, complex without being chaotic. It sounds in its own ancient way like music, not human music, not structured in any way that human musical traditions would recognize, but something that shares with music its essential character, organized sound that communicates something which cannot be communicated any other way. You think about the 60 animals in the valley. You think about what it means to be one of them, large and warm, pressed close to the others in the dark, your voice joining the general calling because joining is what the herd does, and the herd is what keeps you alive. You think about the valley floor, which is soft and damp and holds the warmth of the day longer than the ridgelines do. You know this from the thermal sensors, and how 60 large animals lying close together must generate their own warmth as well. The heat of their bodies mixing with the warmth of the soil, making the valley a small-scaled pocket of comfort in the night. They are not afraid out there. That is the thing you keep returning to on this night and on others when you have stood here listening. Prey animals are often afraid. The behavioural literature is full of studies on the vigilance behaviours of large herbivores, the way they scan and position themselves and respond to sounds that might signal danger. But the behavioural data from the valley herd shows something different at night. The vigilance is lower, the calling is higher, the animals that do maintain watch positions are more relaxed, their movements slower, their scan intervals longer. They are comfortable. They know this valley. They know this night. They have been here before, and they have slept here before, and they have called to each other here before, and the calling is not fear. It is its opposite. It is the sound of a large, ancient, patient creature confirming that it is precisely where it wants to be. The calls begin to slow. One by one, the voices in the valley settle. The last one, the individual with the rising questioning note, trails off after a long minute, leaving behind it a silence that feels full rather than empty, the way a room feels full after music has just stopped. The frogs in the drainage channel resume their song. the generator resumes its place at the center of everything. You go back inside, you write in your log, valley herd vocalizing at approximately 0100, multiple individuals, standard maintenance call pattern, no anomalous behavioral indicators, call ceased at approximately 0115. Then below, in smaller letters, I listened for the whole 15 minutes. There was nothing else to do. There was nothing else I wanted to do. It begins at 2 in the morning, not the thundering arrival of a full tropical storm. That will come later in the wet season, with its lightning and its walls of water and the pressure that makes your ears ache. This is something gentler. A warm rain, steady and fine, the kind that arrives without announcement and settles in for hours, as though it has no particular destination and is content to be falling. You hear it on the roof before you feel it, a sound like a crowd whispering, growing from nothing to a soft, continuous presence. The tin roof of the station amplifies it pleasantly, turning the rain into something almost musical, a rhythm without a beat, a sound that fills the room from above and makes the walls feel closer and more sheltering. The temperature drops 2 degrees in 20 minutes. You feel it on your forearms first, the fine hair standing up in the cooler air, and you pull your jacket from the hook by the door and put it on while still sitting at the desk. The warmth of the jacket is immediate and specific, the particular warmth of your own body recaptured, held close by material. You pull your coffee mug toward you, though it is empty. Old habit, cold cup, warm hands. The comfort is in the gesture. The rain changes things on the island. The sensors register it, of course. The moisture levels and the temperature shifts and the small seismic signatures of heavy rain on certain soil types. But what the sensors do not register is the behavioral response. That, you know from your time here, is something you have to observe directly. In the rain, the large animals move differently. The open grazers, the ceratopsians and the hadrosaurs, tend to stay where they are, which is what you would expect from animals whose evolutionary background did not include the option of shelter. They simply stand in the rain, or more often lie down in the rain, tilting their great heads slightly to let the water run off their frilled or crested skulls. They seem comfortable with it. Their thermoregulation, whatever its exact mechanisms, appears to handle the variation without distress. The smaller animals are more variable. The forest species tend to move deeper under the canopy, which provides real shelter. The layered leaves of a mature jungle canopy are remarkably effective at slowing rainfall, and under the thicker sections of the northern forest, where the trees are oldest and tallest, the ground may stay almost dry during a moderate rain. The rangers on the eastern sector reported last month that during a brief downpour they had observed a group of small ornithopods, juveniles most of them, gathered under a stand of tree ferns whose fronds spread in broad horizontal sheets above the group. The animals were not distressed. They were simply standing under the ferns, dry and apparently patient, in the way that people stand under a shop awning while waiting for rain to pass. You think about this as you sit in the station while the rain taps its soft code on the roof. You think about the juvenile ornithopods under their fern umbrella. You think about the hadrosaurs in the valley now wet, their calling perhaps paused while the rain reorganizes the air. You think about the sauropod you saw earlier at the fence, and whether it is still near the tree line or has moved deeper into the forest. The sensors in the northern section show movement. You look at the tablet and see it, a cluster of dots on the thermal overlay, moving slowly through the understory about 400 meters from the fence. The profile suggests ceratopsians, a small group of 3 or 4 individuals moving in the direction of the drainage creek. Seeking water, probably, though the rain is providing it in abundance, or simply moving because movement is what they do, following some ancient directive that predates the fences and the sensors and the whole careful human architecture of this place. The rain intensifies briefly, the roof sound rising to a fuller pitch, and then settles back into its steady medium register. A small leak has begun at the east corner of the room, not a catastrophic leak, just a thin trickle that runs down the wall and pools in a small depression in the concrete floor that has been catching this particular leak for at least 3 years, judging by the faint mineral stain around it. The previous ranger left a folded towel next to the depression. You pick it up and place it in the pool and the pooling stops. There is something soothing about small maintenance tasks performed in the rain. The folded towel, the thermos refilled when you go to the small kitchen alcove, the tablet propped at a better angle so you do not have to crane to see the sensor display. These small adjustments, these domestic corrections in the middle of the night watch, they are part of the rhythm of the shift, as much as the formal walks and the log entries and the radio check-ins. You go to the window and look out. The rain makes the sensor lights bloom with small halos, each amber pool extended by the falling water into something larger, softer, less defined at its edges. The fence is barely visible. The rain has dropped visibility to perhaps 50 meters, maybe less. Beyond the fence, the jungle is a sound rather than a sight. The million-leaf percussion of the rain against the canopy creating a dense layered roar that is somehow also soft, somehow also intimate, the way a forest full of rain is always both those things at once. The thermal overlay on your tablet shows the island as it really is at this moment, not as the fence and the sensor lights suggest, a human place with known boundaries, but as the heat signatures of living things distributed across a landscape without regard for your maps. The cluster of ceratopsians still moving toward the creek, a larger heat signature to the east, a single animal, very large, lying down. The valley herd, a dense wash of orange on the thermal, 60 bodies pressed close in the rain. And here, one small dot of heat on the east side of the thermal display barely moving. You. The station reads as a warm rectangle, and you within it as a small warm point, sitting at the desk in your jacket, looking at a screen that shows you the world in heat. You are here, they are there, the rain falls on all of you equally. The roof sings its soft, insistent song. You let your eyes close for a moment, just a moment, and the sound of the rain becomes the entire world. Nothing but that. A warm room, a drumming roof, the smell of damp earth and old wood, and all around the island breathing in the rain. There is a particular quality to the hours between 3 and 5 in the morning. Every ranger who has worked nights knows it. The tourists and the day staff do not know it, and there is no good way to explain it to them. It is not something that can be conveyed in description. It can only be experienced by sitting up through the night and arriving at it in sequence, the way you arrive at a mountain pass only by walking the mountain. The quality is a kind of depth. The night has been going on long enough that it has stopped feeling like the absence of day, and has become its own thing entirely, a complete and self-contained world, with its own weather and its own sounds and its own way of organising time. The events of the previous day are remote now. The coming day is not yet imaginable. There is only this, the station, the rain still falling gently, the thermos, the logbook, the sensor display, and the island pressing its living weight against the darkness on all sides. The rain has not stopped, but it has thinned further, almost to a mist now, a precipitation so fine that it is more felt than seen, a coolness on the skin if you go outside, a silver quality to the air if you look at a light source from a distance. The leaf drip from the canopy continues after the rain itself has stopped, a secondary rainfall that lingers for 30 minutes to an hour. The water collected on broad leaves and released in drops large enough to make their own sound on the soil below. The sensors show the island settling. The cluster of ceratopsians has reached the creek and stopped moving. Thermal signatures stationary, probably drinking, possibly already lying down in the creekside vegetation. The large heat signature to the east is still large, still stationary. You have identified it now from the thermal profile as one of the bull carnivores from Sector 9, which the logs show has been observed twice before in this area of the eastern ridge. He is sleeping. The thermal signature has the particular diffuse quality of a large warm body lying flat against cooler ground, the heat spreading and blurring at the edges as it radiates into the soil beneath. He is sleeping on the ridge in the rain. You find this specific detail, the fact of a sleeping carnivore, the relaxed vulnerability of a predator at rest, the warmth of him spreading into the cold ground while the fine rain falls on his skin. You find it quietly beautiful in a way you do not try to explain in your log. The valley herd has been quiet since the rain began. 60 animals, their thermal signatures arranged in the loose oval pattern that the behavioural data associates with overnight resting, are breathing in the valley below your station. Occasionally one moves, a small shift in position, a head lifted briefly and then lowered again. The calls have stopped. In their place there is a silence that is not empty but dense with the presence of 60 large lives, held in the temporary shelter of unconsciousness. You have been awake for hours now. The particular pre-dawn tiredness has arrived. Not the heavy drowsiness of early night, but something more specific, a softening of the edges of perception, a gentle dimming of the distinction between one thought and the next. The desk in front of you is real and solid. The coffee mug is real and empty. The logbook is open at your elbow. All of these things are present, fully present, and at the same time they feel slightly less defined than usual, as though the hours of the night have worn a particular kind of sharpness from them. This is the hour the previous rangers know when the island gives you things that the day never does. Not events, necessarily, though sometimes events. More often it is simply the experience of being present in a place that is alive in ways you cannot catalogue, at an hour when your own defences are lowered enough to feel it. The animals are most themselves in these hours, whatever performance the day requires of them, the vigilance, the display, the territorial assertion, that is all relaxed with the darkness. What remains is the bare fact of their existence, the elementary reality of warmth and breath, an ancient biology persisting in the night. You have heard the older rangers describe this quality in various ways. One of them called it the island's true face, which seemed romantic until you sat through enough pre-dawn watches to understand what she meant. Another said he always felt during those hours that the clock was running differently, that the 66 million years that separated the present from the age these animals belonged to had somehow compressed, that the Cretaceous was not a past but a parallel, something running alongside the present moment rather than behind it. You're not quite sure you would go that far, but you understand the impulse. There is something about watching a Hadrosaur thermal signature slowly rearrange itself on a screen at 3:45 in the morning that suggests time is not the simple, one-directional thing the daylight makes it seem. The animal in the valley is ancient beyond imagination. It is also sleeping right now in the rain, in a valley 3 kilometers from where you sit with your empty mug. Both of these things are simultaneously true, and the distance between them is not distance at all. The mist outside has begun to form at ground level. You can see it where the sensor lights catch it, a low drift of white that moves with the slight air currents along the fence line. Ground fog. The island produces it on nights like this, when the warm earth and the cooler rain air meet at the surface. By dawn, if the pattern holds, the valley will be invisible under it, white from ridge to ridge, the herd submerged, the trees emerging from it like dark towers. The fog will burn off by 9 when the sun is high enough, but the hour before that, the hour when it is deepest and the light is just beginning, is one of the experiences that no photograph and no description ever adequately renders. You make a note in your log. Mist forming at fence line, consistent with standard pre-dawn fog pattern. Estimated visibility at dawn boundary 0 to 200 meters, and then you write, because it is early, and the pre-dawn has softened your editorial judgment. The island is turning itself inward for the last hour of night, everything growing quieter, everything becoming more itself. The rain has stopped entirely now. You notice this without noting the moment it happened. The roof is silent. The leaf drip from the canopy continues in isolated plops against the soil. You can hear them from here, individual drops finding their way to the ground through layers of leaf and branch, a slow, irregular percussion that counts down something you cannot name. The generator hums. The mist drifts. In the valley, 60 animals breathe together in the dark. On the eastern ridge, one large predator sleeps with his warmth draining slowly into the cold ground. And you sit at your desk in the small warm room, pen in hand, watching the world through the window, keeping your quiet record of everything that is. Every workplace has its oral history, the stories that circulate in break rooms and shift handovers, passed from the experience to the new, not written in any official document and not subject to any official version. The island has its oral history too, and on the night shift, with its unstructured time and its hours of proximity, and its particular intimacy with the darkness outside, the stories come out. You have heard most of them by now. Some of them are practical, useful knowledge about the island's quirks and rhythms, information that the orientation manual does not include because it resists formalization. Where the drainage channels are most likely to overflow in the first weeks of the wet season, which sensor nodes run warm and require recalibration twice a year, the particular sequence of sounds, a change in frog call register followed by a stillness in the insect chorus, that experienced rangers learn to read as a signal that something large is moving within 200 meters of the fence. Others are less practical. The older rangers, the ones who had been here since the early years of full operation, carried a different kind of story. the kind that accretes around places where extraordinary things happen, the way mineral deposits accrete around a slow spring. Stories that had been told and retold enough that their edges were worn smooth, that existed now more as shared property than as individual memory. There was the story about the ranger in the third year who walked his perimeter one morning at dawn and found, at the southern corner post, a gift. That was the word he used, and it was the word that stuck in the retelling. Gift. Something that had been placed there deliberately, at the base of the fence post where the ground was flat and visible. A collection of objects, smooth river stones arranged in a loose circle, and in the centre of the circle a large iridescent feather. He photographed it and reported it, and the science team came and took their own photographs and their measurements, and ultimately determined that the feather belonged to one of the larger theropod species, not one typically associated with display behaviour at fence boundaries. The arrangement of the stones they could not explain to their satisfaction. They wrote it up as anomalous and moved on. The ranger whose perimeter it was did not move on quite so easily. He told anyone who would listen for years afterward that there was intelligence in that arrangement. Not human intelligence, but something. Another story, told in different versions by half a dozen rangers who claimed different degrees of proximity to the events. A night in the 5th year when the entire western sector experienced a complete sensor dropout for approximately 4 hours. Not a malfunction. The sensors were working, they were simply registering nothing. No movement in any of the monitored areas, no thermal signatures, no sound above ambient levels. The rangers on duty that night walked the perimeter and found it clean and clear and utterly undisturbed. What had happened was not recorded in any official document. What the rangers told each other was that the animal population of the western sector had simply moved out of range. All of them. Every individual, from the largest sauropods down to the smallest ground foragers. They had gone somewhere the sensors could not follow, and they had stayed there for 4 hours and then they had come back. Why? No one could say. But the timing was noted. It had happened on the night of a particularly intense electrical storm, with lightning every few seconds for much of the duration. The theory that circulated, informal, never committed to paper, was that the animals had sensed the electromagnetic conditions in advance and had found their way, together, to a section of the island where the rock formation was different, where certain minerals in the soil grounded the electrical charge differently. Shelter-seeking behaviour, sophisticated beyond what the models predicted. The science team, when the story filtered to them, was interested but cautious. The rangers who had been on duty that night were less cautious. They called it wisdom. There was the story about the triceratops who came to the eastern fence every year on the same week in early autumn. Always the same individual, identifiable by a distinctive notch in her left horn. Always the same section of fence, the section nearest the old access road where the weekly supply convoy used to travel in the first years of operation before the routes were changed. She would stand at the fence for between 30 minutes and 2 hours and then leave. No one knew why. The science team had theories about olfactory memory, about possible early conditioning from the convoy traffic. The rangers had a simpler theory. She remembered something, and she came back to remember it. These are the kinds of stories that the night shift produces. Not dramatic stories. None of them involve close calls or dramatic interventions or the kind of incident that would warrant an incident report. They are stories about the quality of attention that accumulates over years of watching, about the small evidences of an inner life that the scientific framework does not quite have tools for. You think about them now, in the pre-dawn quiet. The stone circle and the iridescent feather, the night the western sector went dark, the triceratops who came back each autumn to the section of fence where the convoy used to pass. They are not stories that the daytime world would take seriously in any official capacity. But on a night shift in a station that has been watching the island for 11 years, they feel as accurate as any dataset. More accurate, perhaps. Datasets do not carry the weight of a person standing at a fence post at dawn, looking at a circle of smooth stones and trying to decide what to do with what they are feeling. The mist outside has thickened while you have been thinking. The fence is barely visible now. You can see the nearest amber light, but the one beyond it is reduced to a glow without definition. A soft orange presence in the white. The island beyond the fence is entirely gone, absorbed into the pre-dawn fog as completely as if it had never existed. Somewhere in the white the herd is stirring. You can hear it, just barely, on the edge of audibility the first sounds of the morning animals reorienting themselves in the fog. Not alarm calls, not the maintenance calls of deep night. Something between those two things. A sound you do not have a name for yet but recognize as the sound of large animals waking. The sound of 60 ancient lives returning from wherever sleep takes them and finding themselves in a world made new by the morning. You write in your log, missed at maximum depth, sense of visibility compromised, heard audible, behavior consistent with morning waking, no anomalous activity. Then below, the island is full of stories. I'm sitting in one right now. If you're drifting now, let yourself go. Subscribe so the next story is waiting when you return. Sleep well. You take the second perimeter walk at 4 in the morning. The protocol says 4:30, but the fog has been deepening since 3, and you want to check the sensor nodes while the readings are still interpretable, before the moisture begins to interfere with the thermal sensors in the northern stretch. You pull on your jacket and your boots, check the torch, and open the station door onto a world that has become entirely white. The fog is not thin. It is not the decorative kind of fog that forms at the edges of things and then dissipates when you walk through it. This is deep, serious island fog, the kind that forms when a warm land surface and a cool rain air meet with nowhere to go when the moisture has saturated the air and the air has saturated itself. And the resulting fog is a physical presence, dense enough to feel on your skin, dense enough to mute sound and light and distance. The nearest sensor light is 10 meters away. It is a soft glow, directionless, without the definition of a lamp or the edge of a beam. The one beyond it is barely perceptible as a change in the quality of the white, a slightly warmer section, a suggestion of amber rather than amber itself. Beyond that, nothing. The fence is invisible. The tree line is invisible. The world has narrowed to whatever lies within the radius of your torch's dampened glow. You walk the familiar path and find it strange. The fog has not moved the path. It is where it always is, the ground under your feet unchanged, the posts and nodes at their known intervals. But it has removed the context. Walking the fence in clear night air, you always have the sense of the larger island behind the fence, the vast living territory your fence contains. In the fog, that larger context is gone. There is only the immediate 10 meters, the pool of your torch, the sound of your boots. The sounds are different in the fog. Sound travels strangely in high moisture conditions. Some frequencies are absorbed and others are amplified, and the result is an acoustic environment that is simultaneously muffled and unexpectedly clear in certain registers. You can hear quite distinctly the water dropping from the canopy 30 meters to the east, the individual drops audible as separate events. You can hear your own breathing, your own footsteps, with a clarity that feels almost intrusive. What you cannot hear is the valley. The fog has swallowed it. The pre-dawn waking sounds that you heard from the station, the first murmurs of the herd returning to consciousness, are gone now, absorbed into the white. The island is in a kind of sensory pause, its sounds held in suspension, waiting for the fog to lift. The first node reads clean. The second reads clean. At the third node, the one at the curve where the fence turns east, you stop and stay still for a moment, because stopping and staying still in the fog is a different experience from stopping in the clear night, and the difference is worth noticing. In the clear night, stillness means visibility, the ability to see in all directions, to have the context of the larger world around you. In the fog, stillness means disappearance. You become part of the fog. Your heat signature, if anyone were watching the thermal display, would show as a single point of warmth in a white environment, and then you would be invisible to the sensor as well, because the fog interferes with the thermal imaging at close range. You stand at the curve post for 3 minutes and you listen. The dripping canopy. Your breathing. The distant, barely there sound of something very large moving through undergrowth. Not close, not anywhere near the fence, but somewhere in the green dark beyond the white. Moving with the careful, unhurried deliberateness of something that knows its ground. The sound disappears as gradually as it began, left to right across the invisible landscape, at a pace that suggests something large enough that each stride covers several meters of ground. You think, the ridge. You think, the bull from Sector 9, waking from his sleep on the eastern ridge and moving back toward his territory at dawn. You cannot confirm this. You write it down anyway when you return. sound consistent with large theropod movement, eastern quadrant, pre-dawn, no fence proximity, no anomalous behaviour. The remaining nodes check out clean. You complete the circuit and return to the station, pulling your jacket closer against the cold that the fog has brought in. The station door opens onto warmth and light and the familiar smell of the room. You stand at the window and look at the white world outside. Somewhere out there, the valley herd is waking. 60 animals in the fog, their morning restlessness starting. In an hour, when the light begins to change, they will start to move. The daily drift up toward the ridgeline forests that the behavioural data shows with such consistency. In the fog, their movement will be like weather. You will hear it before you see it, the ground tremor of 60 animals in motion carrying through the soil to the station's concrete floor. The sun is still 40 minutes away, but already the fog has taken on a slight luminescence at its upper edges. Not light yet, not the defined brightening of sunrise, but a change in the quality of the dark that experience teaches you to read as the first announcement. The island knows, the animals in the valley know, the trees know, their photosynthetic machinery already checking in. You pour a glass of water, the night has dried you out in the subtle way of all long watches, and you carry it to the window and you stand there looking at the white, beautiful, impenetrable world your station has been standing in all night. The generator hums. The roof makes the small sounds that roofs make when moisture and temperature have been working on them all night, and the fog very slowly breathes. There was a scientist who did not leave when her research contract ended. This is a story the Rangers know well. It is told differently depending on who is telling it, but the core of it is always the same. She arrived on a 3-year contract as a behavioural ecologist, specialising in large herbivore social structures, and when her 3 years were complete she renewed, and then renewed again, and after 9 years she had become the de facto institutional memory of the island's animal populations. The person who knew which individuals were which, who had the most complete longitudinal data set on the herd behaviours, and who had, somewhere in the middle of the second contract, stopped being a person conducting research on the island and become, in some way that she herself described with characteristic precision, a person of the island. Her name was Dr. Catalina Reyes, and she kept a different set of notebooks from anyone else on the research team. The official notebooks went into the data archive. The others, the ones she kept in the field, in the pre-dawn dark, in the observation blinds and on the station steps, stayed in her quarters and then, when she eventually did leave, were donated to the facility library, where they sit in a box on the higher shelf, available but rarely consulted. You have read sections of them. The researchers who have read them tend to describe them as unusual, not unscientific exactly, but occupying a space between science and something else that does not have a clean name. She recorded data with complete precision, timestamps, behavioural codes, GPS coordinates, individual identification numbers, and in the same notebook, in the same handwriting, she recorded observations that did not fit the behavioural coding system. One entry from her 4th year. Watched the old female in herd 7 from the blind on the eastern ridge for 3 hours this morning. She spent 40 minutes of this time standing at the edge of the group, looking east, without eating or moving. I have seen this behaviour in her 12 times now. The sensor data shows nothing in the eastern area that would explain the attention. No predator signatures, no competitor herd, no food source. I do not have a code for this behaviour. I am calling it watching. Another entry, from a late season evening. The bachelor males have been doing something I cannot explain. 3 of them, all mature, none currently in breeding condition. They have been moving together along the creek for 5 days, stopping at the same locations each day, and at each location they perform what I can only describe as an inspection. They lower their heads, they sweep the ground with their crests, they vocalize at a frequency below the range of my equipment. I don't know what they are looking for. I don't know if they find it. I have decided that not knowing is the appropriate response. The rangers who knew Dr. Reyes describe her as quiet, methodical, and possessed of a particular quality of attention that made the animals comfortable in her presence, or at least more comfortable than they were with most humans. She moved slowly and without urgency. She had learned, over years of fieldwork, to make herself non-threatening not just behaviourally, but in some more subtle register. the way that experienced animal handlers describe making themselves neutral, removing intention from movement, becoming presence without agenda. She was the person who first documented the valley herd's nighttime calling pattern. She was the person who identified the autumn fence visits of the notch-horned triceratops as individually specific, ruling out territorial behavior and establishing it as what she carefully termed site-specific periodic recurrence. She was the person who noticed, in the 8th year of her residency, that the overall vocal activity of the island had changed in character over the preceding decade, that the calls were more varied, more complex, suggesting a communicative sophistication that was expanding rather than static. When she left, her departure quiet and uncelebrated, her last season quiet in the way of last season's, she gave a brief talk to the assembled research staff. The rangers were not officially invited, but several of them came anyway, stood at the back of the seminar room. She talked about data. She talked about the methodology improvements she recommended for the next phase of research. And at the end, she set aside her notes and said something that the rangers who were there remember differently from each other, as people remember the end of talks, in approximate paraphrase. What she said in the various versions was something like this: "Whatever you think you're studying here, you're also being studied. That is not a mystical claim. It is an observable fact, if you pay attention over a long enough period. The animals here are curious about us. They have been curious from the beginning. We arrived in their world and they have been watching us ever since with the particular kind of attention that large, intelligent animals give to novel phenomena. We have records of their behavioral adaptations to our presence that go back to year 1. What we have been slower to record is the mirror process, what we have learned from being watched." The rangers at the back of the room were quiet after that. The researchers asked their questions, which were methodological, and she answered them, which was also methodological. And then it was over, and people went to dinner, and 2 days later Dr. Reyes was on the ferry to the mainland, carrying her luggage and her official research materials and presumably the other notebooks, the ones that would later go to the facility library. You think about her in the pre-dawn quiet. You think about the difference between studying a place and belonging to it, about the permeable boundary between those two states. You think about 9 years of pre-dawn watches and the particular kind of knowledge that accumulates in a person who keeps showing up, year after year, for the early morning hours when the island is most itself. The fog outside has begun to thin at the very top. You can see it even from the window, a slight transparency at the upper edge of the white that suggests sky rather than continuing cloud. The first imperceptible brightening, 40 minutes before sunrise, is beginning. The island will emerge from the fog the way photographs emerge in Developer. Gradually the darkest shapes first, the ridgeline trees resolving out of white, the fence taking on definition, and then finally the valley, the herd, the whole vast ordinary miracle of it. You write Dr. Reyes's name in the margin of your log, not as an official notation, just as a record, a small acknowledgement, a way of keeping her presence in the room for a little while longer. Then you sit back in your chair and you watch the fog begin very slowly to give the island back. Not every night shift is the same. You know this after a few months. The island has its own calendar, separate from the human one, that governs which kinds of nights are possible. Spring nights have their own character. Restless, loud, the animals more alert and mobile than usual, the breeding behaviours beginning to assert themselves in ways that show up on the thermal sensors as unusual clustering and movement patterns. Summer nights are dense and heavy, the heat not lifting fully even at 3 in the morning, the insects at their maximum volume and variety, the air so saturated that the sensor equipment runs warm. Autumn nights are different from all of these. Autumn nights on the island have a quality of gathering, not a threatening gathering, not the gathering of a storm or a crisis, but the gathering that belongs to transitions. The light changes in the afternoon, the shadows lengthen earlier, the temperature drops 10 degrees between noon and midnight rather than the summer's 5, and the animals feel it in whatever way animals feel seasonal shifts, through light-sensitive cells, through temperature receptors, through the slow biological clock that evolution has calibrated over millions of years to the rhythms of the planet. You're thinking about an autumn night from your second year on the island, not tonight, which is a spring night, warm and humid, but that night, which you carry with you as a kind of reference point for what the island is capable of when conditions are right. It was the 3rd week of autumn, the week when the temperature had finally committed to its decline, and the morning fogs were reliably clearing by 9. You had been on the night shift for 6 weeks by then, long enough to know the station's rhythms, but not so long that the wonder had settled into routine. You were sitting at the desk at 2 in the morning when the ground began to move. Not earthquake move, not alarm move, a slow bass register tremor that you felt through the chair, through the desk, through the floor, the kind of vibration that comes from many large objects moving in coordinated proximity. You went to the window and the sensor display and you saw it. The entire ceratopsian herd from the southern sector, 70-odd individuals moving north along the interior fence line. The autumn passage. You had read about it in the logbooks, but reading about it is not the same as standing at the window at 2 in the morning while 70 ceratopsians walk past your station in a column that takes 45 minutes to pass completely. They moved with their heads low, which was unusual for ceratopsians in general. They were typically high-headed, alert, the great frills forward-facing. In the passage, they walked with a different kind of attention, their heads angled slightly down and slightly inward, as though the movement itself required concentration. The calves were positioned in the centre of the column, flanked by adults on all sides, an arrangement so consistent across the whole length of the group that it had to be deliberate. The sound of them was the thing you remember most. Not a dramatic sound, no calls, no distress vocalizations, just the deep rhythmic percussion of 70 large animals walking on the same soil at the same time, a sound that was also a vibration, was also a presence. The concrete floor of the station transmitted it into your feet and your chair and the mug on the desk, which rattled softly against the desk surface for the entire 45 minutes of the passage. Where were they going? The logbooks had partial answers. The northern sector had better winter grazing. The vegetation there retained more moisture through the dry months, and certain species of ground cover that the ceratopsians preferred were more abundant there. The passage north was a response to that gradient, a population-level expression of a preference that individual animals could not fully articulate, but that millions of years of selection had written into their bones. But the logbooks also noted, and Dr. Reyes's notebooks noted it in more detail, that the passage was not random. The same individuals led it each year, identifiable by their distinctive frill patterns. The timing was consistent within a window of 2 weeks, responsive to temperature changes that the researchers could measure, but that the animals detected first. The column formation was consistent across years, the calves in the centre in the same flanked arrangement. Whatever governed the passage, it was not improvised. You remember standing at the window until the last individual had passed, a large adult female moving more slowly than the others, whose gait suggested the arthritis that the veterinary logs confirmed had been developing for 2 seasons. She passed the station at the pace of her own limits, unhurried, unassisted, maintaining her place at the rear of the column with the careful dignity of an animal who knew her role and would play it at whatever pace her body allowed. After she'd gone, the ground continued its tremor for several minutes, the vibration of 70 large animals transmitting through the soil even after the last one was out of visible range, and then it stopped. The station was quiet again. The desk was quiet. The mug stopped rattling. The sensor display showed the northern fence line now populated with slow-moving heat signatures, the herd spreading into the wider territory like water finding its level. You wrote in your log that night, Autumn Passage observed, Sector 7 fence line, estimated 72 individuals, duration 43 minutes. All individuals confirmed within fence boundaries, passage concluded without incident. What you did not write, because it did not fit the log format, was this. For 45 minutes I was watching something that has been happening on this island, or islands like it, or landscapes like this one, for longer than the word ancient can carry. The ceratopsians were doing something their ancestors did, following a route their ancestors walked, guided by a calendar their ancestors kept. I was a very recent development standing at a window watching something very old pass by. I do not know what to call the feeling that produces except grateful. You carry that night with you. You carry the vibration in the floor and the mug on the desk and the arthritis-slow female bringing up the rear in the dark. You carry all of it the way you carry the other things the island has given you, quietly, in the part of yourself that is not the official record. There is a story that circulates among the rangers about an infant. Every station has its version. The Sector 3 rangers have theirs, The Eastern Outpost Rangers have theirs, but the one you heard first, the one that was told to you on your third night by the ranger handing over the shift, is the version that stayed with you. In the 7th year of operations, a juvenile hadrosaur wandered from the valley herd. This was not uncommon. Young animals in any herd population test boundaries, and the sensor data showed regular instances of juveniles straying toward the perimeter before the calls of the herd drew them back. What was uncommon about this particular juvenile was what it did when it reached the fence. It stood at the fence for a long time. The station log from that night recorded the initial approach at 21:14 and the departure at 22:50, an hour and 36 minutes. The ranger on duty, whose initials the log gives only as MT, a 2-year veteran of the night shift, did not approach the fence. She observed from the station window and from the camera system, watching the juvenile stand at the fence in the sensor light. The animal was small by hadrosaur standards, perhaps 2 meters at the shoulder, crest not yet fully developed. The thermal image showed it as a compact oval of warmth at the fence line. In the optical cameras you could see more. The crest's iridescent quality even in the sensor lighting, the wide dark eye, the posture that MT described in the logbook as not fearful and not aggressive, but something that she struggled to categorize. Curious was the word she used with a note beside it, though that word feels inadequate. The juvenile did not press against the fence. It did not test the wire or attempt to find a gap. It stood at a distance of approximately 1 meter from the fence, and it looked through the fence at the station, which was lit inside, and at MT, who had moved to the window. The camera system recorded the eye movements. They were oriented toward the light source, toward the building, toward the person visible in the window. For the last 40 minutes of the hour and 36, MT sat on the station steps. She had turned the interior lights off so she was not backlit, so the animal could see her as well as the building rather than just the silhouette of a lighted window. She sat on the top step with her hands in her lap and she looked at the juvenile, and the juvenile looked back. No sound was recorded. The sensor audio shows ambient insect chorus, distant tree movement in a light breeze, and no vocalization from either the juvenile or the herd, which was at approximately 800 meters from the fence at this point. The juvenile was silent. MT was silent. The log entry, in the unusual extended form that MT favored for unusual events, describes the silence as the kind that is full rather than empty. At 22:50, a call came from the direction of the herd, a single note, not the full maintenance call pattern but something briefer, more directed. The juvenile responded with an audible vocalization of its own, short and high, and then turned and began to walk back toward the herd, slowly at first and then at a trot as the distance from the fence grew and the pull of the call strengthened. MT watched it go. The log entry ends. By 2300, the juvenile was back within the herd thermal signature, and the normal group distribution had resumed. I stayed on the steps until 23:15 for no reason I can formally justify. You think about that night often. You think about MT on the steps with her hands in her lap and the lights off, sitting in the dark so that the juvenile could see her clearly, choosing presence over the clinical remove of the observation window. You think about the 40 minutes of mutual attention, the animal looking at the human and the human looking at the animal, in the quiet station light of a 7th-year evening. The animal sciences are careful about anthropomorphism. This is appropriate caution. The attribution of human mental states to non-human animals has a long history of distorting both scientific understanding and the ethical treatment of animals. It creates false familiarity and false equivalence, and it tends to produce interpretations that say more about the interpreter than the subject. MT was careful about this too. Her log entry is scrupulous in its avoidance of claims she cannot support. What she does claim, and what the camera data supports, is that the juvenile oriented specifically toward the lit building and the visible human, that it remained at the fence without distress for 96 minutes, and that its departure was triggered by a herd vocalization, and not by any change in the ranger's behavior or the ambient conditions. What she does not claim in the official record, but what she told every ranger who asked her about it in the years afterward, was that the young animal had been looking at her with recognition. Not recognition of her specifically. This was its first documented approach to the station. Recognition of something more basic than that. The fact of another living being. The fact of attention. On your own 2nd year, something similar happened. Not the same species, not the same station, and the duration was shorter. perhaps 20 minutes rather than 96. A young ornithopod that had followed the drainage channel west along the interior fence and arrived at the corner of the station clearing. It stopped when it saw you standing on the steps. You stopped when you saw it. You looked at each other for 20 minutes. Then it turned and went back the way it had come, following the drainage channel east, its small body disappearing into the brush with the precise economy of an animal that knows exactly where it is going. You never wrote it up in the official log. There was nothing to write. The sensor data would show a small heat signature near the station for 20 minutes. Everything was within normal parameters. Nothing required notation. But you remember it. You remember the quality of its attention, alert but not alarmed, interested but not demanding. The complete, unguarded quality of a young creature looking at the world without the filter of experience or fear. You remember the 20 minutes as a kind of gift, freely given, freely received, needing no documentation to be real. The light does not arrive all at once. This is something the daylight world tends to forget about dawn, that it is a process rather than an event, a gradual addition of luminosity to a dark world that happens at a pace slow enough to follow if you are paying attention and fast enough to miss if you are not. The first sign is not light at all. It is a change in the quality of the darkness itself. The black of 3 in the morning is a full sealed black, uniform across the sky and the ground and the space between. By 4:30 the black has become less uniform at its upper edges. There is a distinction now between the sky and the space below it, a slightly different grade of darkness that suggests the sky is beginning to remember what it can do. By 5 the change is more pronounced. The eastern sky, the sky above the ridge from which the large carnivore descended in the night, has taken on a deep blue-black quality, darker than the western sky but darker with depth rather than with opacity. It is the dark that precedes light because it is lit from behind, and the difference, once you see it, is unmistakable. The fog is thinning. You can see the process from the station window, watching the amber sensor lights take on their shapes again as the fog disperses. The nearest light has been a formless glow for 2 hours. Now it becomes a cone, a defined source with an edge. The fence post below it resolves from a pale ghost back into steel. The fence wire, the double horizontal run of it, reappears strand by strand as the fog retreats, like a photograph developing in the wrong direction. The valley is still white. The fog there is deeper, held between the ridge lines, slow to release because it has the topography to protect it. But the ridge lines themselves are beginning to emerge. First the suggestion of a silhouette, then the definition of individual trees at the ridge's crown, their profiles distinct against the blue-black sky. The island is returning from wherever the fog sent it. The thermal display shows the valley herd in motion now. Not the full movement of a herd in transit, not the autumn passage that you remember, but the internal restlessness of 60 animals beginning their morning. Small clusters separating from the main group moving toward the creek. Juveniles moving through the adult aggregation in their energetic, disruptive way. The adults beginning to orient toward the ridgeline, the direction of the day's browsing, the stored knowledge of where the good vegetation is. You watch the display for a while, and then look at the window and the brightening sky, and then back at the display, moving between the two representations of the same reality. The thermal display gives you data, position, movement, cluster patterns, the individual brightness of each heat signature indicating body temperature and metabolic activity. The window gives you something the display cannot, the visual quality of the light, the way it is changing minute by minute, the particular shade of the eastern sky that is not quite blue and not quite grey, but something the language has not named because it only exists in this specific window between night and morning. The birds have started. This is the reliable marker of the shift from pre-dawn to early dawn, the birds. They are not the giant animals this island is famous for. They are the ordinary birds, the small species that have colonized the island in the years since its vegetation grew dense enough to support them, the ones that were already here before the larger inhabitants were introduced. They begin their morning chorus at the first hint of real light, a few individual notes at first and then more and more until the sound is general and continuous, a woven web of bird sound above the still fog-covered valley. The sound is cheerful. That is not a scientific observation, but it is an accurate one. The birds do not call at dawn because they are cheerful. They call because the light triggers hormonal responses that express in vocalization, because calling at dawn serves territorial and mate attraction functions. But the sound they make is, from the position of a person standing at a station window at 5 in the morning after a long night, cheerful. It sounds like the beginning of something. Your shift ends at 6. The day ranger arrives at 5:45 for the handover briefing. 15 minutes of log comparison, sensor status update, any notable events from the night. By 6, you will hand over the station and step outside into a morning that is no longer yours, and the island will continue without you as it has been continuing without anyone's particular attention for the 36 million year span between its original age and the present. But for now, for this last hour before the handover, the night still belongs to you. You are the night's witness. You are the person who sat through the darkness and the fog and the rain and the long pre-dawn hours and kept your record, your small and imperfect and wholly genuine record of what the island was doing while the rest of the world slept. You close your logbook, you cap your pen. The station is warm around you and the coffee's long since gone, and the window shows an eastern sky that is now unmistakably brightening, a pale bar of lighter dark above the ridge that will, in 20 minutes, be the first colour. Pink first, the way of eastern sunrises in this latitude, and then gold, and then the full flood of morning light that will burn the remaining fog from the valley and wake the herd from its last resting position and send the ridge carnivore back to his territory and begin everything again. You think about the valley herd, about to wake fully into another day. You think about the logbooks on the shelf, 11 years of nights recorded in various handwritings. You think about MT on the station steps, lights off, watching a young animal watch her back. You think about Dr. Rhea standing at the eastern ridge at dawn, watching the old female look south at something the sensors could not register. You think, what a place, what an extraordinary, improbable, terrible, gentle, ancient place. The ridge above the valley catches the first light. It holds it for a moment, just a moment, before the light reaches down into the valley itself, and the fog begins to burn and the herd rises from its night resting position, with the low collective sound of 60 ancient lives beginning their day. The day ranger arrives at 5:43. You hear the vehicle before you see it, the soft electric hum of the facility's utility vehicles, different from the generator's constant note, approaching down the service track from the direction of the main compound. The headlights sweep briefly across the station window as the vehicle parks, and then the engine stops, and there is a moment of quiet, and then the sound of boots on the steps. The door opens. Ranger Peter Tavares, day shift, Sector 7. You have worked with her for most of your time on the island. She's tall and habitually unhurried, and she carries her coffee in a thermos that has a small dent on the left side, where she dropped it on a fieldstone during her first week of service 4 years ago, and has never replaced it, which you understand to be a kind of loyalty. She stands in the doorway for a moment, reading the room the way experienced rangers read rooms, the position of the log, the state of the desk, the thermal display, the quality of the air inside. Then she comes in and sets her thermos down and pulls the second chair to the desk and sits across from you. The handover briefing is 15 minutes. It is also, in practice, something more than a briefing. It is the daily transfer of the night's experience to the beginning of the day, the moment when the night shift's knowledge becomes the day shift's foundation. Peter listens the way she always listens, which is completely. She asks 1 or 2 specific questions about the eastern ridge carnivore's position, about the creekside ceratopsians, and makes her own notes on her tablet. You tell her about the sauropod juvenile at the fence on the first walk. She nods. She has seen this individual herself, on day watches, near the Sector 8 boundary. You tell her about the valley herds calling at 1 in the morning, the rain at 2, the fog that began at 3. You tell her about the thermal signature of the sleeping carnivore, his heat spreading into the cold ridge ground. You tell her about the second walk in the deep fog, the sound of large movement in the eastern understory. What you do not tell her, because it is not in the official log and not part of the official handover, is the rest of it. The logbooks on the shelf and the entries written in smaller ink. The autumn passage from your second year. The ornithopod in the drainage channel that looked at you for 20 minutes. The thought you had at 3 in the morning about time being a different shape than the day makes it seem. These things are not part of the handover briefing. They are part of something else. The personal inheritance that each ranger carries from their night shifts, the accumulation of small and unloggable knowledge that the island gives to people who pay attention over time. Peter has her own version of this inheritance. She has been paying attention for 4 years. You can see it in the way she reads rooms and the way she listens, and the particular quality of patience she brings to observation. By 5:58, the briefing is complete. You gather your things: jacket, torch, personal bag, the book you brought and did not open. Peter has already turned to the desk and is settling into the start of her own day. The sensor display open, her thermos at her elbow, the window showing a morning that is now fully arrived, the valley visible below the retreating fog in the first full light. You stand in the doorway for a moment. Peter looks up. You nod. She nods back. It is not an insufficient exchange. You walk down the 3 steps and the day hits you all at once. The warmth of the risen sun, still low but already working, the air that smells of wet vegetation and recent rain, and the particular green animal scent of the island that you notice only when you have been inside long enough to forget it. Your boots find the familiar path. In the valley to the south, the herd is moving. You can hear it from here, the deep percussion of the morning movement, the low collective sound that carries through the ground as much as through the air. 60 ancient animals beginning their day. The fog is almost gone. The last white wisps burning away in the angle of the morning light, the valley opening up to receive the sun. You walk toward the vehicle. You're tired in the good way. The way that comes from a full night of attention, from the kind of wakefulness that is not performance but presence. The tiredness sits behind your eyes and in your shoulders and moves through your legs with a slight heaviness that will be gone after sleep. Before you reach the vehicle, you stop. You turn and look south toward the valley. The ridge above it is fully lit now, the trees at its crown gilded by the morning light. Below the ridge, the herd is moving through the last of the fog, their heads and crests visible above the white, moving with the purposeful looseness of animals heading toward the browsing grounds. You watch them for a minute, just a minute. Then you get in the vehicle and you drive back toward the main compound and the sleep that is waiting for you, carrying the night with you the way you always do, quietly, in the part of yourself that is not the official record. The island continues. The day shift settles in. The herd climbs toward the ridge. The carnivore sleeps on the eastern slope in the new warmth of the morning sun. The juvenile sauropod browses near the Sector 8 boundary fence. The ornithopods follow their creek. Everything is where it should be, doing what it has always done, in a world that is both 66 million years old and newly made in this morning's light. You're already asleep before you reach the compound. The ranger quarters at the main compound are simple and quiet. A room with a bed, a window that looks east, a small desk that is rarely used for anything except setting down the contents of pockets, a ceiling fan that moves the air at a pace barely distinguishable from stillness. Curtains that are good at their job. When you draw them, the room becomes the same hour of day regardless of the actual hour, a controlled dark that the body recognizes as permission. You draw the curtains, the room becomes its own night. The process of lying down after a night shift has its own particular quality, different from the lying down of ordinary tiredness. Ordinary tiredness wants relief. It meets the pillow with urgency, the body dumping its load of fatigue all at once. Night shift tiredness is more gradual. The body is already slow, already moving at the night's pace. It does not crash into sleep so much as drift into it, the way a boat in still water comes to rest against a dock. A gradual slowing, a final alignment, and then stillness. You lie in your made-dark room and you let the night come with you. This is what always happens. In the first hour after a long watch, the night comes with you. The images of it are still present, not haunting, not anxious, just present in the way that any recent experience is present, still active in the circuits of attention. The sensor lights along the fence, the sauropod neck in the amber glow, the valley fog, the deep bass calling of the herd. The calling is the last thing. It often is. That low, felt as much as heard frequency seems to persist in the body after the ears have stopped receiving it, the way a tuning fork persists in its vibration after being struck. You lie in the dark room and the last thing you feel before sleep is the memory of that vibration in your sternum. The maintenance calls of the herd, all those voices saying, "I am here, we are here we are." It is, you think, a very good last thing. The island continues without you. This is a comfort rather than a loss. The island has been continuing without any particular person for 36 million years in its current form, and 66 million in its earlier ones. Your night shift was a brief, attentive parenthesis in that vast continuity, and its ending does not stop anything. The herd is still moving toward the browsing grounds. The fog is still burning off the valley. The ceratopsians are still at the creek. The ridge carnivore is still sleeping in the sun. You are not needed for any of this to continue. That is the most restful thought in the world. Sleep moves in from the edges, the way the fog moved in last night, gradually from the periphery toward the centre, softening the edges of thought and perception before dissolving them. The room is dark. The fan moves the air. Your breathing slows to the pace of something much larger and slower than a person. The pace of the valley herd's deep sleep, perhaps. The pace of the island's own breathing as it did what it does all night with or without any witness. The images that remain in the dark are gentle ones. The amber lights and the silver fog and the herd calls moving through the valley air. The logbooks on the shelf with their various handwritings. The ornithopod in the drainage channel. The juvenile hadrosaur at the fence. MT on the steps with the lights off. Two living things looking at each other across a boundary, both of them still. The island is old. You're young. The island will be here when you're not, and the animals will move through their days and nights and seasons without needing anyone to record them, as they did for 66 million years before anyone thought to try. But tonight you were there. You watched. You wrote it down in your logbook with your pen, in your handwriting, the small and imperfect and wholly genuine record of one night's watching. I am here, we are here, here we are. The fan moves the air, the curtains hold the dark, the ranger sleeps. And on the island, 20 kilometres away, the morning continues its ordinary magnificence. The herd browsing in the ridgeline trees, the fog lifting from the last low sections of the valley, the insect chorus rising to its daytime register, the carnivore turning in his sleep on the warm ridge to face the full sun, the juvenile sauropod pressing its nose briefly against the Sector 8 fence and then moving on. The whole vast machinery of ancient life running as it always has, whether anyone is watching or not. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it really helps us continue making more content. Anyways, see you in the next one. And now the story's done and the night is done and the island is sleeping, and so are you, or very nearly. Let the last images settle like the fog settling in the valley. Slowly, without urgency, covering everything in a soft white that is not absence but fullness. The amber lights along the fence, let them blur, let them become only warmth. The generator's hum, let it become only rhythm, a heartbeat, your heartbeat, slow now, slower. The calling from the valley, that deep ancient patient sound, I am here, we are here, you are here, here you are. The island breathes. You breathe. The same air, the same rhythm, the same long, slow exhalation of a world that has been breathing for longer than memory. The curtains are drawn, the fan turns, the dark is good and deep. You were there for the night. You watched. The island saw you watching. That was enough. It was always enough. Let the herd drift through your thoughts like the fog drifts through the valley, gently, without urgency, without destination. Let the amber lights blur into darkness. Let the fence dissolve into the general warm dark. Let the valley calls grow quieter and quieter and quieter still, until they are only a vibration, and the vibration is only a warmth, and the warmth is only your own breathing, deep and regular and safe. Sleep now. The island is here, the animals are sleeping, the rangers are sleeping, the night watch is over. Everything is as it should be. Everything is exactly where it belongs. Sleep. If you liked this video, let me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious about that. And if you have a suggested topic, feel free to leave it in the comments.